Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Today we have a special subject that I really had to get out because yesterday, not once, not twice, but 3 separate people sent me this report and this information, and I feel since I'm a health teacher and teaching about diet and health, I have to give this out to you because everybody, I teach about health, but I always say that health is more than just diet alone. If we truly want to be healthy, we have to understand the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual aspects of health. And yes, food is so important, but it's also what's done with the food. And we're warned many times in Scripture not to eat food that has been sacrificed to other gods. And we have a problem going on today because it's happening. And it's happening in a deceptive way. Just like it says in the Scriptures, during the end times, a deceitful spirit will come upon you and he will make you do things that are against Yahweh, our Creator. And that's what's happening today with our food. And it's creating a big problem because we just did last week's Torah portion. We read here where it says in Exodus 23. It said in Exodus 23, for pay attention to everything I have said for you to do. And do not invoke the names of other gods or even let their name be heard crossing your lips. So keep that in mind, everybody, as we do today's teaching, because we're going to see something very shocking and something we need to be aware of. And everybody out there, James 4:17 says to know good and not to do it, to him it is sin. Maybe you don't know what I'm about to say, but after you hear it, then you're going to know it. And then what are you going to do? Now, if you're not a believer out there and you somehow stumbled upon this video, I think this might concern you as well, because there's a lot more to it than just saying, I'm going to follow my Creator. There's a lot more to it from a curses standpoint and from a physical standpoint, because there's this issue that we're going to talk about today that can affect you whether you're a believer or not. So I think you need to sit back and watch this whole video. It says in the Scriptures in 23:24 of Exodus not to follow or worship the pagan gods or serve them or follow their practices. And then it goes on to say in Exodus 23:25, you are to serve Yahweh, your Creator, and He will bless your food and take away sickness from among you. Well, the opposite of blessing is a curse. So if you're not serving Him, your food is cursed, and food is cursed today. Well, what am I getting at, everybody? What I'm getting at is, as I go to buy my foods, and I don't just eat plain fruits and vegetables from the average store. I know there's more to fruits and vegetables than just apples and bananas, so I go to some quite exotic places. Not even exotic. I go to Spanish markets and Asian supermarkets to get some exotic fruits from different countries. But as I walk out of these Asian markets, I see this little statue with food on the statue. Now, if I took that little orange, and it's not only about meat, everybody, because everyone always brings up meat when you talk about eating food that's sacrificed to other gods. If I go and take that little orange that has been sacrificed to that little statue to the god of those people, I'm eating food that has been sacrificed to other animals. And the Scriptures say we're blessed for following our Creator, and our food is blessed. And we're cursed, and our food is cursed if we do not. Well, if I didn't know that orange was sacrificed there, to know good and not to do it to him to sin, well, I didn't know. But what if I knew and I knowingly went and took that orange off that little statue that was sacrificed to another god? There are consequences, folks. And the reason I say this is because there's an issue that's come up recently to my attention, and that is something called halal food. Halal food is kind of the Muslim version of kosher food. But when I brought this up, somebody sent me a report saying there's a lot of big companies like Costco and other major supermarkets across the country that are selling halal food, but they're taking the label off, or they're cutting the label off and repackaging it. So we don't know. It's quite deceptive. But there are many companies that knowingly, there's even websites that show where the food is being served, and they're purposely, they have the label on there, and it's growing quicker than you can imagine with all the major stores that are carrying this halal food. Now, I'm not going to get into why they might carry these foods, because I don't know their motive. You know, maybe they just want to reach out to the Muslim community and make more money. Maybe they have another motive. But all I know is what the scriptures say about foods of other gods or foods that have been sacrificed to other gods, and also what the Quran says about how to make foods halal. You see, I recently posted this on Facebook, and I told people about this, and I had some Muslim people contact me saying, kosher food is the same thing as halal food. Well, that's not exactly true, and I'm going to discuss that today. But we first have to understand, what is halal food. Halal food is food that, let's use meat as example. Before Muslims can eat a certain food, what they have to do to it is they have to look towards Mecca, which is their center of their God, and they have to pray to Allah in Allah's name and bless the food in Allah's name, which is not the same name of the God that I worship, Yahweh, our Creator. And did it not say here that I just read to you in the scriptures? It said, do not invoke the names of other gods or even let them be heard across your lips. Now let me say this, folks. From a diet standpoint, I would say halal food is probably pretty healthy, or at least healthier than the average food that's served out there today. From a physical standpoint, at least from a diet standpoint. As a matter of fact, a lot of the customs and cultures that the Muslims do from an integrity standpoint, I'm not saying all, don't misunderstand me, but a lot of them go along more with Scripture than what most of the Christians are doing today. However, the major issue is, to me as a believer, is they're praying things in a different name and a different God than the God I know. And the Scriptures warn us against doing that. Now, this video is not against anyone personally or any Muslim. The video is about, our kosher foods and halal foods, the same thing. Because I have a lot of Christians that don't really know the Scriptures, and they don't even care about the Scriptures, and they don't even eat kosher food, and they'll eat anything. But I also know a lot of Muslims that don't know their Quran either, and they'll just say things like kosher food and halal food is the same thing. Well, no, it's not, because halal food is, we could say, ordained in a different way than kosher food, and some of the guidelines and laws are similar of how the animals are to be slaughtered or how the food is to be blessed, but there are some differences. And not only differences in the types of food that should be eaten, but also the reason why. For example, one of the rules of the kosher food is not to eat a horse because it doesn't chew the cud and have split hooves. But in the Quran it says not to eat a horse because a horse is an animal of statute and used for riding soldiers and so on, and elite men. So we don't want to disrespect the horse. So that's their reasoning. So even though the reasoning is different, the result in that case was the same. Horses are not kosher or halal. Now halal foods also say, that anyone who's a Muslim can face Mecca and pray over the food in Allah's name, and the food will become halal. Well, in the kosher understanding of it, there's three types of kosher. So let me explain kosher. There's biblical kosher, there's rabbinical kosher, and then there's sensible kosher. So biblical kosher says in the scriptures, it gives a clear definition of what food is clean and what food is unclean. It says in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, animals that do not have a completely split hoof or foot, plus they do not chew the cud or regurgitate their own food. That would be an animal that was an unclean food if they do not have the split hoof or they chew the cud, or they don't chew the cud. Now, if they have one or the other, they're still an unclean animal. But if they have both, then they're considered a clean animal. So, for example, a camel would not be a clean animal because even though it chews its cud, it does not have a completely split hoof. Even though it appears like it does, it really doesn't. So that gives you an example. Horse, same thing. So that's biblically kosher. Then there's rabbinically kosher. And rabbinically kosher says a man that looks like me has to pray over the food, and there's a whole bunch of laws and guidelines around that. Well, that's rabbinically kosher, which is not biblically kosher. And if somebody feels that they need to follow the rabbinical way of doing things, go ahead and do it. But I know the scriptures say not to add or take away from Scripture. And within the oral Torah, the rabbis have added and taken away a lot of Scripture. And that's one of the problems Yeshua had with him. Then there's what I call sensible kosher. And sensible kosher is, I don't care if a rabbi prayed over it, and I don't care if the Scriptures say it's a clean food. if that food is not healthy for me, I am not putting it in my body. So, I don't eat fish in general, but if I did, I would not eat fish from the ocean in New York City. It is just not clean. So I hope you get what I'm saying here, everybody. So that's kosher. But again, the Quran says anyone who's a Muslim can pray over the food in Allah's name, and they have to be facing Mecca and so on. So basically, for a food to get the halal symbol, or halal symbol, what it needs to have is somebody who prayed over it in the name and blessed it in the name of Allah, which is a different God than Yeshua, than Yahweh. Now, again, I'm not saying, I'm not out in another video I could discuss if that's good or bad or wrong or right. I am not talking about that, so I'm not looking for comments about that right now. What I'm looking at is saying kosher and halal foods are not the same. They're not the same, so we need to understand that. And we need to look to see where these foods are, and if you really love Yahweh and you want to keep His commands, you will not eat the foods that are sacrificed to other gods. And some people might say, well, where does it say that? A Muslim recently contacted me and says, Paul, do you even have a Quran? And I know that they don't, because the average Muslim is like the average Christian, and they don't even know their scriptures. But the Muslims that do know their Quran, they know it pretty well. But this person said that the halal foods and the kosher foods are the same. And that's how I knew they didn't know their scriptures. Well, I happen to have the Quran here because I study all different types of books to learn and grow. And I happen to have a Quran here. And it says in Quran, in the 5th chapter, in number 4 of the 5th chapter, it says, when you're eating food, make sure you mention Allah's name upon it to observe your duty to Allah. And then it goes here and says again in the 6th chapter, in 1:18, it says, eat of that which the name Allah has been mentioned, and the believers of His revelations. And then it says, how should ye not eat of that which the name of Allah has been mentioned, in 1:19 of the 6th chapter. And then in 1:21 of the 6th chapter, it says again, and eat not where Allah's name has not been mentioned, for it is an abomination. So basically the Muslims, or at least the Quran, is calling kosher food and any other food other than food that's been prayed over Allah's name an abomination. So they're calling the scriptures or the word of Elohim that says to only use my name, Yahweh, an abomination. So that's completely against what the scriptures say. And Yeshua's coming back, everybody, and this antichrist means against Yeshua. It's not even Christ, anti-Yeshua. It's against Yeshua, or anti-Yahweh. And when it says in the scriptures of the Quran that any food that is not prayed over in the name of Allah is an abomination, that's going against the word of Yahweh. And then here's one more place in the 6th chapter, in 145, it says again, it says, do not eat food that was sacrificed in any name other than the name of Allah. So that's what the Quran says about this. And we already saw what the scripture said about it. Again, in Exodus 23:13, it says, pay attention to everything I have said to you, and do not invoke the name of other gods or even let their name be heard crossing your lips. So I'm doing wrong right now, but even saying the name of these other gods, I'm doing it in a way to teach. So, maybe I'm not even doing right there, everybody, but maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but I'm just letting everyone know that it says in the scriptures not to even let their name pass our lips. But I do believe it says as in a way of worship or as of praying. So I don't believe I'm doing something wrong right now by doing this teaching. What does the scripture say about this some more? Well, in Revelations 2:20 it says, notwithstanding I have a few things against you, because thou shorest that the woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach, to seduce my servants, to commit fornication, and eat things sacrificed to other idols. And to eat things sacrificed to other idols. And I could tell you, it goes on and on and on. There's so many scriptures, from Acts 15 and the council, all the way to the issue with Balaam and Balak in Numbers. The issue and the curses that come along with eating food that was sacrificed to other idols, because the scriptures clearly warn us against that. So everybody, we have to be careful about this merging trend that's happening now, because major stores are like Costco and other supermarkets are selling foods that have been sacrificed to other idols. Now, I'm not saying don't eat at Costco or get food from Costco, and I'm not saying don't get food from these other places, and I'm not saying that everything the Quran says is bad, and I'm not saying every Muslim person is bad. I'm not claiming any of that. But I am saying it goes directly against what the Scriptures tell us to do. And that is bad. And that is wrong. So we need to understand and wake up. And we need to really protect ourselves. You know, I like to refer to myself as the health watchman. And I hope this is going to bring your awareness to these things. Now, you know, we got the whole other issue of the vegetarian versus the meat, and I'm going to give a teaching soon. I have a new teaching about scriptures in the Bible, what they really say and what they really mean, how they're misunderstood. And if you're a vegan, guess what? You don't have to worry. Well, if you're a vegan, you still have to worry about this issue, because it's not only animals that are sacrificed to other idols. It's food, all food. So, and it might not be through the Muslim faith, but it could be through the Asian faith, or through the Hindus or the Buddhists or something else. So you do need to be aware of whatever faith it is, because they are not the same as biblically kosher. And we need to be aware of this, everybody. Now, everybody, you know, Torah Life Ministries is all about teaching people about health from a physical, emotional, and spiritual standpoint. And I hope you learned today, so please post your comments. If you're listening to this on Torah Life Ministries, post your comments below the video. And if you're listening to this via our podcast on Podomatic, you can go to Torah Life Ministries and just click on podcast. And if you listen to that, you can still post your comments below as well. I will answer questions and comments, everybody, so if you have any, please post them. But please, nobody, give me these comments that say, well, you know, it's brutal to eat meat. Well, you know, that's a whole nother subject. Or it's unhealthy to eat meat, a whole nother subject, and we can talk about another time. But if there's anyone out there that thinks that halal foods, as spoken about in the Quran, is the same as biblically kosher foods as spoken about in the Bible, if you think it's the same, please show me why. Because from my clear viewing of these things, they're clearly opposite. As a Muslim told me, oh, kosher food and halal food is the same thing. The prayers are just in a different language. No, they're not the same prayers. They're to different gods. Different gods, and we're warned in scriptures not to make any prayers to different gods, and not even to let their names cross our lips. Folks, I'm just a messenger, and I'm just giving you the information. You can read it for yourself in the Bible, you can read it for yourself in the Quran, and then you can decide what you want to do. I'm just supplying this information for you, because I want you to be healthy emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And whatever you decide to do, you know, do it with joy, and make wise decisions according to Scripture. To know good and not to do it, to him it is sin, everybody. Now that you know, what are you going to do? All right, everybody, this is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Thanks for checking us out, and we'll see you again soon. Shalom.
Seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's way.